Good morning. Please pray with me. Let your light, O God, shine in our hearts that we may see you. Let your light shine forth from our lives that others may see you and give you praise. Amen. If, like me, you are a fan of Ernest Hemingway, you can probably recognize his style at a glance. That taut economy of language, the simple declarative sentences, the strong action verbs, the exaggerated understatement. It's a style that practically begs to be parodied. For nearly 30 years, the Bad Hemingway contest did exactly that. Authors were invited to submit one really good page of really bad Hemingway. And there were only two rules. The piece had to mention Harry's Bar and Grill in Venice, which was one of Hemingway's favorite watering holes, and it had to be funny. Here's a sample, and I'm quoting from memory here, so don't hold me to the exact wording, but you'll get the idea. Nick pushed the cart down the grocery store aisle. The cart was made of steel. It was a good cart. Nick reached deep into the freezer chest. He pulled out a can of frozen orange juice. He turned and saw Bill at the end of the aisle. "This can is cold," said Nick. "Yes," said Bill. "The cans are always cold. That's the way things are here." And on it goes like that. You get the point. I propose that we do for theology what this competition did for Hemingway. What I have in mind is an annual competition called The Best of Bad Theology. The rules would be simple. Entries would not be judged on style. Theological writing never has any style. Entries would be judged according to how well they presented the perennial favorites of bad theology. The objective here would be to recycle theological ideas that have long been discarded by the church but continue to be popular. I don't expect anyone to take me seriously enough to actually organize such a contest, but if we're forced to shelter in place for more than a week, we might take it up as a way to fight boredom. If we held the contest, though, I think I could predict what the winning entries would be. Hillary proposed one contender in her sermon last week, the prosperity gospel. This favorite bad theology says that if we do the right thing, if we utter the right formula, God will necessarily bless us, and bless us primarily financially or materially. In fact, God will have to make us prosperous, as if we could force the hand of God. And the corollary is that if we're not rich, then obviously we have not made God happy. I think the prosperity gospel would be a strong contender for the prize of best bad theology. But if I were judging the contest, I'd award the blue ribbon to a related but somewhat different idea. I'd give the top prize to the phrase, "Everything happens for a reason." In her mid-30s, Kate Bowler was living her dream life. After receiving her PhD, she got the first job she applied for, and it was a good one. She was teaching the history of Christianity in America at Duke Divinity School. She had published a book on, of all things, the prosperity gospel. She was married and raising a beautiful boy. Then she unexpectedly was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Writing in the New York Times 4 years ago, about a year after the initial diagnosis and surgeries, Bowler described her experience. "I am 35, she wrote. I did the things you might expect of someone whose world has suddenly become very small. I sank to my knees and cried. I called my husband at our home nearby. I waited until he arrived so we could wrap our arms around each other and say the things that must be said. I have loved you forever. I am so grateful for our life together. Please take care of our son. Then he walked me from my office to the hospital to start what was left of my new life. It was not long before a neighbor knocked on the Bowlers' door to tell Kate's husband that everything happens for a reason. Here's Kate again. I'd love to hear it, my husband said. Pardon, she said, startled. I'd love to hear the reason my wife is dying, he said, in that sweet and sour way of his. In today's gospel, the Pharisees give voice to the idea that everything happens for a reason. Who sinned, they asked, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Being born blind is a bad thing, obviously. There must be a reason that happened, and the reason must be tied to someone's sin. Since a man was born blind, it's kind of hard to imagine that his sin was the reason, unless he was violating the 10 Commandments in his mother's womb. Was his parents' sin the reason he was born blind? Hidden behind the Pharisees' question, of course, is the question that we all ask. How can I avoid the same fate? What do I have to do to keep from going blind or getting cancer? How much control do I really have? If I drink a kale smoothie with flax seeds every morning, will it help me fight off the coronavirus? Jesus sidesteps this question of blame and of cause, and therefore of control. He takes the man's blindness as a given, a fact of life without any clear reason. And then he gets to work. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day, he said. And then he heals the man and restores his vision. As frustrating as it may be, Christian faith has never offered us a completely satisfying answer to the question of why bad things happen, even to good people. What it does offer us, though, is the ongoing work of redemption. Truly bad things happen. People are born blind. They catch viruses. They get cancer. We catch viruses. We get cancer. Christ is crucified. We can't find truly satisfactory reasons. But we do know that God stares these horrible things squarely in the face and then gets to work. God never lets the bad have the last word, but goes on pulling for good, working to bring forward something better, even out of tragic situations. Jesus is raised to new life. The blind man receives his sight. This is our work, to face the worst head on, to not blink or slide away or explain away suffering, but to look it squarely in the face and then get to work. Bring light. Bring good. When Marian Shepherd began to lose her sight, she reacted as most of us might. She cried. She felt sorry for herself. She raged in anger. She asked why, and she feared the loss of freedom. Frank Bruni wrote about Shepherd in a recent column. She spent months wrestling with those emotions until she realized that they had pinned her in place. Time was marching on and she wasn't moving at all. Her choice was clear. She could surrender to the darkness, or she could dance. She danced. When Bruni caught up with her recently, Shepard, age 73, was leading a line dancing class for older adults with visual impairment. "We've got to keep moving," she said. "You know why? Because we're alive. As long as we're alive, we have to keep moving." You and I may be apart from one another this morning, but we're alive. And God is alive. And God is working among us and through us for the ongoing redemption of the world. Amen.